Make no mistake, we're witnessing what I believe to be the worst scandal in American law enforcement history. We're going to run through it. What's happening inside the FBI is stomach-turning. And it's stomach-turning because 99.99% of the FBI's street agents are really talented, incredibly patriotic and dedicated, hardworking men and women, bravely putting their lives on the line every day to protect you and me. They're doing a great job. But sadly, a few key people at the top of the FBI are tarnishing the reputation of the Bureau to such a degree, to such an egregious and tragic degree. They're putting the lives of these agents at risk. You see, when management in a law enforcement agency compromises the authority and the integrity of that agency to what we see happening at the FBI, agents' lives are at risk. When you pull out your credential, when you say I'm FBI, ATF, NYPD, there needs to be respect for that credential. But now the cartels, wise guys, La Cosa Nostra, gangsters are saying, yeah, the FBI is so corrupt, why do we have to play ball? If they don't have to play by the rules, why do we? And when agents are going to interview, and I talk to agents, I talk to law enforcement people all the time, their credential, the authority, the respect for that credential isn't what it used to be. It's a very dangerous situation to be in on the street. Now, the most recent scandal is this guy, Peter Strzok. This one should turn your stomach. We're now finding out that this past summer, I believe it was in August, Robert Mueller removed a guy named Peter Strzok, a senior FBI counterintelligence official, from his team, from the special counsel's investigative team, because the guy was sending anti-Trump texts to his mistress. Even worse, that mistress is a woman named Lisa Page. Lisa Page is a lawyer for the FBI. And guess who Lisa Page reports to? Andrew McCabe. It always comes back to Andrew McCabe. Everything dirty, everything corrupt, everything anti-Trump, everything anti-Trump administration, everything Steele dossier, everything fake news, Russia collusion, always comes back to Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe, the Democratic operative whose wife's Jill McCabe, Dr. Jill McCabe, his wife, received nearly $700,000 from longtime Clinton ally and fixer and then Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. Andrew McCabe, a guy who had a vendetta against General Michael Flynn because General Flynn wrote a letter in support of a female employee of the FBI who sued the FBI and McCabe for sexual discrimination. There's a lot going on here. The conflicts of interest are vast. McCabe, who was nudging Comey to give Hillary a pass. This is very dirty, but today is not about McCabe or Comey. We've done them ad nauseum. Today, we're going to touch on them a bit, but it's really about this guy, Peter Strzok. The guy kicked off the team for the anti-Trump text. Now, who is Peter Strzok? Well, this is the troubling part, because I spoke to sources inside the Bureau, and to a person they said they didn't know him well. They crossed paths with him, but his reputation was that of a superb counterintelligence officer. Well, one apparently with a bias. One who came up under Mueller, under Comey, under McCabe. We're now learning that the FBI, well, the higher-ups at the FBI, not the rank-and-file street agents, but the people that wanted to be assigned to headquarters, and that's very telling. Your really good street agents really don't want to be assigned to headquarters. They want to go out there, do their job, and catch bad guys. Sure, they want to come up through the ranks. But the guys that want to be in the top spots at headquarters are typically politicians. They're very far removed, culturally, from the street agents. Strzok was one of those guys. I'm being told he was in the Comey-McCabe cabal. It's really, really bad stuff. And of course, he would have been picked by Robert Mueller. Now, I believe that Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, is useless. I gave the guy some time, but he was a DOJ lawyer. I don't like DOJ lawyers at the helm of the FBI. I'd like to see agents at the helm of the FBI. Bigger problem? While at DOJ, he was subordinate to Mueller and Comey. He's not all of a sudden going to start bossing them around. Mueller controls him, and I believe to a large degree Comey controls him from the outside. Wray is useless. And we know that because Christopher Wray knew that Strzok had been kicked off Mueller's team. He would have had to have been part of it. Strzok was then reassigned to what the FBI calls Siberia, their HR department. Now, there is nothing worse that can happen to you as a cop than being reassigned to an administrative office. That means your career is dead. You're done. Pack it in, retire. You're never going any higher than this. You had the brass ring. You dropped it. You are out of the game. Wray would have had to have known that. But you know what Wray didn't do? Wray had to sign off on his transfer to HR, But Wray didn't tell Congress why. So congressional oversight committees, most namely the House Intelligence Committee, that's why Devin Nunes, the chairman, is blowing a gasket, were never informed this past summer that the reason Strzok was taken off of Mueller's team was because of anti-Trump texts to his mistress, with whom he was having an extramarital affair, multiple violations of FBI policy, the text, the mistress, the whole bit. He was an FBI employee as well for McCabe. This is so bad. So let's look at why it's so bad. Well, let me put this in terms a leftist could understand. Now, it is inconceivable to believe that Strzok didn't interview General Flynn. Flynn was a spy and a spy master, ending his career running the Defense Intelligence Agency before being tapped national security advisor by Trump, the master spy Flynn. So, of course, you're going to have your lead counterintelligence guy in that interview. You're going to match your subject one-on-one. You're not going to bring in a subordinate agent. So, if you look at the way things have gone for years in law enforcement and standard operating procedure, I would be shocked to find out that Strzok did not interview General Flynn. In fact, he probably led the interview team, and as he did against Manafort and Papadopoulos. And I think we'll probably have confirm on that. We just haven't gotten it yet. But again, it would be shocking to me because that's just how things are done in law enforcement. So assuming he did lead the team. Remember, General Flynn only pled guilty to false statements to investigators. Now, if the investigator leading the interview was biased against you, those charges are severely tainted. So, in terms a leftist can understand, let's replace General Flynn with a black suspect. If a black suspect spoke to Strzok, and the only thing that black suspect pled guilty to were false statements to Strzok, and we later on found out that Strzok had texted racist texts and images to his mistress, things that were very cruel and very damning of African Americans, there would be riots in the street. There would be demands to drop every charge against the black suspect. There would be riots. There would be congressional committees being called. The Congressional Black Caucus would go nuts. Democrats would go nuts. And they would be calling for Strzok's career on a silver platter. They would be calling for him to lose his pension, to be publicly flogged, tarred, and feathered in the town square. But it's not happening because Strzok was a leftist and General Flynn was pro-Trump. General Flynn was a patriot. Now, if he made false statements to the FBI, it was stupid of General Flynn because he didn't have to. Nothing he did was illegal. But that's for another segment. That's how bad what Strzok did is. But it goes even worse. It goes even deeper. It's worse because now, knowing this, every high-profile political case Strzok worked on, and there were many, could possibly be tainted. Think about this. If Strzok had clear bias toward the Democrats, if he had clear anti-Trump bias, every case he worked on with a political figure during his decades at the FBI is potentially tainted, potentially has grounds for an appeal based on this information because he sent those texts to another FBI employee. Those are exculpatory. That's evidence for the defense. This is a crisis for Mueller. Now, what Nunes said, and this was, he's right. He said, quote, "We now know why Strzok was dismissed, why the FBI and DOJ refused to provide us this explanation, and at least one reason why they previously refused to make FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe available to the committee for an interview." He's right. The FBI and DOJ are covering things up. Now, another important fact here is that McCabe and Strzok appear to be the two guys who were handling Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, and the fake news dossier, which appears to have been the basis for the FISA warrant. So the FISA warrant that enabled the Trump team to be surveilled by the Obama administration, apparently on behalf of Hillary, and the Steele dossier that was pushed to the media to discredit Trump shortly before the election. It looks like the FBI was in on all of this under the direction of Comey, McCabe, and now we're finding out Strzok. This is really, really bad. This is terrible. But let's take it a step further. If Strzok and McCabe handled Christopher Steele in the dossier, that means they didn't vet the dossier. That means they wanted the dossier to be right, despite the fact that it wasn't. And that means that the only reason that General Flynn was sitting in that chair speaking to Strzok, the only reason Manafort was sitting in that chair speaking to Strzok, or I should say, or his investigators. We don't know if Strzok was the guy who interviewed him. I suspect he was. And we now know that Papadopoulos was sitting in that chair, potentially speaking to Strzok, because of a fake news dossier. Because of that fake news dossier, a special counsel's investigation was launched that never should have been. So you've got three people now facing criminal charges. Well, they pled guilty. Papadopoulos and Flynn. Manafort, who knows what he's going to do. Manafort committed financial crimes. If he did all that's alleged, he deserves to pay for that. But Papadopoulos and Flynn only pled guilty because an investigation took place that should never have taken place. Now, I'm a fan of General Flynn. I'll admit it. I think General Flynn served this nation honorably for 40 years. Like I said, he's a spy master, and I believe that when he got into that chair, he sensed in that room that he was among hostiles. This was not an impartial investigation, that it was a witch hunt, and he miscalculated and made some misstatements. He was put in an impossible place. He was put in an impossible place, General Flynn. Give the other side opposition research, junk, meaningless opposition research, on Donald Trump to make his life miserable, or try to give the president, your current boss, cover and not release all the details to these people. It was an impossible position for the general to be put in, and he never should have been, because it looks like Strzok, McCabe, and Comey rigged this entire thing. They used a dossier to push a fake news narrative that there was Trump-Russia collusion. Mueller's investigation was launched, and it was a circular process. All of the players that Mueller, Comey, and McCabe wanted out of the picture were brought in. Like I said, General Flynn wrote a letter on behalf of an FBI employee suing McCabe. Now, a guy named James Gagliano wrote a good piece in CNN where he talks about Peter Strzok, and there's something very important in there. Because Peter Strzok was also, and we now know, the lead investigator on the Hillary Clinton email case. Well, this is incredible, isn't it? So he's got the dossier. He's the handler, alongside McCabe, of Christopher Steele and the dossier inside the FBI that's used to launch a bogus special counsel investigation, a witch hunt. He's also the guy who was tapped to lead the Hillary email case. Now, if we didn't know all the things we know about the Hillary email case, if we didn't know that James Comey was fired for lying, and we didn't know that James Comey drafted a letter exonerating Hillary 2 months prior to even interviewing her in that bogus interview, we would think what I'm about to read you was a very ethical thing to do. Quote from the CNN piece by James Gagliano, quote, prior to Strzok's demotion, he had worked and supervised innumerable high-profile cases. In fact, former FBI Director James Comey had hand-selected him. Again, former FBI Director James Comey had hand-selected him to lead the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server in 2015. Well, now that doesn't seem ethical, does it? Now that seems pretty nefarious. James Comey hand-selected an Andrew McCabe disciple right around the time Andrew McCabe's wife got $700,000 from Clinton fixer Terry McAuliffe for her state Senate campaign. James Comey hand-selected the guy who would lead Hillary's email investigation, the guy who, alongside Comey, cleared Hillary Clinton, the guy who also helped push the fake news dossier, the guy removed from the special counsel's team for anti-Trump texts with his mistress. Now, Gagliano makes some important points. I brought one of them up before. Strzok exchanged text messages with another Bureau senior executive, Lisa Page, who served as FBI lawyer for Deputy Director Andrew G. McCabe. All comes back to McCabe again. The DOJ's Office of Inspector General, Department of Justice's Office of Inspector General, has been reviewing the communications, some of which are purported to contain derogatory comments about then-candidate Trump, which could have been interpreted as a pro-Clinton bias. No, not could have. It is pro-Clinton bias. Now, he goes on to say, and this is important, in the FBI, where I served for a quarter of a century, we are strictly forbidden from discussing investigation details in texts or emails. To do so would make them discoverable. One legal provision that potentially requires the sharing of all relevant documents between plaintiff and defendant attorneys prior to trial. Meaning, those texts would have been used by defense attorneys. Now, this is where it gets a little bit intricate. But think about this. The FBI doesn't tell the House Intelligence Committee why Strzok was removed. The FBI doesn't tell us, and Mueller and the FBI don't tell the House Intelligence. Mueller and the FBI don't tell us, the public, why Strzok was removed. They don't tell General Flynn's lawyers, Manafort's lawyers, or Papadopoulos' lawyers. Think about that. Why? And then what happens? Well, pleas on minor process charges are forced. Pleas that might have otherwise not been agreed to by the suspects if they knew that the lead investigator was biased. So they waited to release this information until after Papadopoulos' plea, until after General Flynn's plea. This is filthy. This isn't dirty. Like I said, this might be the worst corruption scandal in American law enforcement history. It doesn't get any worse than this. It just doesn't get any worse than this. Now, Donald Trump has been on the warpath of his tweets over the last couple of days, so I suspect he knows something's up. I believe his informal kitchen cabinet is briefing him. There's some pretty well-known media figures who are upset about what's happening, and they're finally breaching protocol and getting into the president's ear. But I'm more concerned what's happening inside the FBI, because this is so bad. This is so egregious that we had a lead investigator, we were kept in the dark, that a lead investigator was biased against the subjects of an inquiry, of a probe, and he was left on the case, even though that bias was known. And only when it appeared it was going to become a liability for Mueller was he removed. And that was the entire thesis of Gagliano's article in CNN, and that Mueller threw him out as a sacrificial lamb. He says, Mueller's swift response upon learning of Strzok's ill-advised text might therefore be a preemptive strike to neutralize some of the criticism and ameliorate some of the image damage his probe has steadily endured from Trump supporters on the right. So this guy Gagliano clearly wants to give them some cover, but there's no more cover left to be had. This looks really, really dirty. Let me tell you something. If a street agent had sent texts, derogatory texts about the subject of an investigation, he'd have been immediately reassigned, probably fired, at least suspended. His name would have been dragged through the mud and shamed, and any ethical prosecutor would have dropped the case. But what's going on here proves once again there is a sick double standard for the left. This entire investigation is an absolute farce. Mueller's entire special counsel office is now a charade. It needs to be shut down today. This is a crisis, the likes of which we've never seen. We have an out-of-control special prosecutor weaponizing biased FBI agents and 17 biased lawyers against a sitting president based on a fake news junk dossier that was handled by the guy kicked off the team for bias. It needs to be shut down today, and people need to be held accountable. If you like this content, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. If you're already a subscriber, thanks very, very much. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.